If you're a decision maker, entrepreneur, or business owner, you're probably facing lots of challenges on a daily basis. How do I grow my team? How do I grow my company? And how do I grow my revenue into a future? Wouldn't it be great to talk to somebody who's ranked as a #1 management guru by Business Week, profiled by Fast Company as one of the world's top 10 creative people in business, a top 5 coach in Forbes, and recognized on Thinkers 50 as one of the world's leading business thinkers? He's also somebody that I was able to stand on stage next to as the two Daves in Dubai. That's a clue as to who this person is. He wrote the foreword to my new book. It's up there. The book's The Thought Leader's Playbook, available for you very soon, but he's available for us right now. Ladies and gents, it's my great pleasure to invite you to be coached by, next on Speak on Stage, the incredible Dave Ulrich. Welcome to Speak on Stage with Dave Crane, the podcast where we unpack the art and science of public speaking to help you command the stage with confidence and authority. I'm your host, Dave Crane, and as a seasoned speaker, coach, and entertainer, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of individuals like you to unlock their true potential on stage all around the world. Each week, we'll bring you candid conversations with industry experts, successful speakers, and thought leaders, delving into proven strategies, practical tips, and personal anecdotes to empower you to become a captivating communicator. So whether you're a seasoned pro looking to refine your skills, or a beginner taking your first steps onto the stage, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering the craft of public speaking. So grab your notepad, open your mind, and get ready to amplify your impact as we embark on this journey together. Welcome to Speak on Stage with Dave Crane. Together, let's jump and grow wings on the way down.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, Dave, to be with you. Welcome to my office. This is where I live. This is where I work. It's obviously nighttime, whatever you're watching now, but welcome to my office and some of the people whom I have great respect and admiration for.
And whereabouts is your office? I see there's incredible thought leaders behind you, and I can see it's nighttime. Whereabouts are you now?
I live in the United States, in the West, in the mountains, and near Salt Lake City, Utah.
Brilliant. Now, the thing is, when we jumped on stage before, and this is before COVID, we talked about the impact of digital on the HR workspace and how people had to reinvent and they had to think about bringing data into their offices. And a lot of the HR people were just furiously making notes as we went along. And then COVID happened and everything's changed. So what do you think the biggest impact has been on the workplace post-COVID?
Well, it's interesting because pre-COVID, we wouldn't have done this. I didn't like being on video. I don't know about you. I just loathed looking at myself in pictures and video. And I think COVID forced us to recognize that technology allows us to connect with each other. We had FaceTime, we had Skype, but at COVID, we had Zoom, we had Teams, we had other methods. And it allowed us to build relationships even at a distance that we never were able to do before through technology. I think now post-COVID, those relationships need to find ways to become deeper and more connected with each other. So it's not just about accessing and seeing each other. Welcome to my office. I get to see you in your setting. But it's about building connections and relationships, which goes beyond simply the technology.
But that becomes a lot harder in the modern workplace. So many organizations and CEOs are now trying to get their rent money back again by getting all the people to come back to the office. But people got used to being independent. Now, that makes a lot of differences. First of all, working from home gives you a lot more chance to be with your family, but it also means you're distanced from your organization. And the only way, really, that an organization can keep tabs on how well you're doing is to monitor, almost Big Brother-like. So that makes a challenge for any HR professional, which would be, how do we make sure that we've got the same relationship with our staff when we've got an opportunity to take from anywhere around the world, but keep the same kind of energy and momentum of the organization. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a whole bunch of thoughts on that. One is hybrid work is going to happen at this point. We're going to have work that's together and separate, technology and personal. And most companies are discovering that you personalize hybrid work depending on the job and the person and the situation. That what we're doing now can be done through technology. We have not met much in person. We met a number of years ago, but we're doing this through technology. Other jobs require in-person work. I'd like my doctor, when they do an assessment of my physical body, to be able to touch it and work with it. Restaurants, chefs, cooks. Work depends on the situation and on the job. I think what we're finding is, number one, a lot of personalization. What's your situation? What's your work requirement? Number two, where you work is almost less important than how your work creates value for someone else. In theory, you've written a great book. I bet you didn't write that book sitting in an office 8 to 5. I bet you wrote that book somewhere. If you write like I do, I often write at 3 in the morning when an idea hits me, or on the weekend. Or the first book I wrote, we dedicated to the Toshiba laptop because we wrote it on airplane rides going to and from Dubai. Work can be done in so many different places today. And the key criterion for work is not where you work, but how does the work you do create value for a user, a customer? I hope this podcast creates value for those who listen. Doesn't matter where we are, if our ideas create value. And I think we're seeing that happen. What I get worried about is where you started. If executives have an all or nothing, all employees are going to come to the office, all employees are going to work at home, that becomes kind of silly. That's kind of like, and again, this works for me and it wouldn't work for you, but people may get it when they say, we have one size fits all clothing. And I go, those sizes never have fit me in my life because I'm a big man. It isn't one size fits all. It's personalized. It's tailored to the individual.
Can you really create that kind of relationship if you've got digital staff that you will never see in person? I'm saying this in terms of even the dating world, which Tinder and so on might make it easier to get access to people, but certainly the skills of relationships disappear when there's no water cooler to hang around.
No question. And that's why people in hybrid work are doing both. They're saying, in fact, the research out of Stanford is becoming, Nick Bloom is getting pretty clear that most companies are finding policies where we come together for 2 or 3 days, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, depending on where you are in the world. And then we have flexible hybrid work. Now, there's some jobs where you don't have to come together. If you're doing sales, if you're doing other kinds of things, but you need to do both. And I remember, it's probably been 15 years now. Our son was getting married and he and his wife had connected through technology. And he said, Dad, do you have any advice? And I said, you ought to spend some time with her to find out what she likes to eat and how she likes to eat and how she cleans her house, because there is a relationship. And after he got married, he said, that was good advice because the technology is good. It helps. It's an enabler. The example I love to use, and I don't know, Dave, if you have children. We have 3 children and 10 grandchildren, pictures on the walls. We connect with them in person. We have dinner on our weekends, but we also connect with them virtually. We check in on Zoom, we check in by phone, we check in. And so navigating those two things is important. The one line I really like, in person, there was work done by a number of years ago by great colleague Tom Peters. He called it managing by wandering around. When we're in the office, we wander around and we bump into people like bumper cars, if they have those in Dubai or wherever our audience is today. Well, on Zoom, we can manage by checking in. So I call my daughter, who decided to leave her professorship in sociology and go to law school at age 40. Monica, how you doing? I think leaders can do that with their employees. I'm calling today, or I'm checking in on Zoom. Don't go through all your business stuff. How you doing? What's going on in your life? And I do that with our kids. We try once a week with each of our kids. How you doing? So instead of managing by wandering around, we manage simply by checking in. One great leader said she does that once a week with the 10 or 12 people who report to her. Let's have a 5-minute check-in. What's going on? So I think if we get smart, technology is an enabler. It's not a replacer. We're not going to use something to replace what we've done. We need relationships. And then when we come together, be together. Don't come together and go into your office and close your door. come together and say, we got to get together, we got to meet, we got to break bread, we got to manage what we're doing so that we work together to begin to go forward with the work we do.
On that particular subject, and I completely agree about the opportunities to take to get together, there's an elephant in the room, not in our particular virtual rooms, but that's AI, which is going to drive a lot more people more remote because of a distance that you don't need to have between getting work done. But more than anything, remote from your job, the reinvention, the repositioning. How does that have an impact in what the modern workplace should look like?
When AI hit and Chat GPT about a year and a half ago, we have 3 children, and I mentioned our daughter is a professor of sociology. She called me and she said, Dad, my world's over. Students will never write a paper again. They're going to use Chat GPT. I'm not going to teach ever again. And I wasn't versed on it, I'll confess. So I got on about a year ago and I said, write a 200-word essay on the future of human resources, the area I study. Boom, 10 seconds later, there it is. And I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, that's really good. In fact, it's really good. Her job is over as a professor. My job's over. Now, having said that, let me talk about some things we're knowing about AI that will be so helpful. Number one, I read it again, what it had prepared. This is a sentence from Jeff Pfeffer. This is Linda Grattan. This is Dave. This is John Boudreau. Chat GPT doesn't create the future. It summarizes the past. If you're going to be a thought leader, use Chat GPT to summarize what's been done and then go beyond it. That essay was wonderful of information 2 to 5 years ago, but it wasn't the future. I know that people listening on this call want to say, how do I brand myself for the future? And this is still on the first point, so I'm going to ramble a bit here. One of my professor friends now says, whenever I make an assignment for a paper, I ask people to turn in 2 papers. One is the Chat GPT paper, and the other is the one they've written. If you're going to be a thought leader and just depend on Chat GPT, you're going to get intellectually lazy. You're going to regurgitate what's been done. Thought leaders look at Chat GPT and then go the next step. So at a personal level, I don't start with Chat GPT. I start by saying, here's a problem I'm interested in, whatever it is, intangible value, culture, leadership. What's my thoughts? And then often I'll say, well, let me just see what others have said. So that's number one. Chat GPT is not thought leadership. It's thought synthesis. Number two, right now, AI and in the field builds efficiency because it can summarize previous work. What are the skills of an employee in this job? And it summarizes what's been done. It doesn't give augmented information that makes better decisions. I was in a session today. It was really fun. 500 people. And I said, there's an S curve in every change, and people know what S curves are. Where are we in AI? And everybody voted, and the average was about 2 to 3.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of AI is being used to simply process previous information more efficiently. Ultimately, AI is going to be used to collect information to do augmented intelligence, not artificial, and to do informed intelligence to make better decisions. My third caveat of AI, so one, AI, it's the past, not the future. You want to be a thought leader? Don't depend on AI. Go beyond AI. Two, make sure that we move up that S curve to informed intelligence that informs how we make decisions. And number three, be really careful with AI. I love research. It's one of my passions. It's why I did PhD. I should show something funny since we're in my office. I did a dissertation on numerical taxonomy 50 years ago, which is research. And back then they sold dissertations. This is university microfilms. You may be able to see that.
Yep.
I got a check, and the check was for $11.85. So I spent a year doing research and got paid $11.
There you go.
I had to frame that. I think that's just classy.
Brilliant.
It's funny. We do research. We've just done research with 5,700 companies using AI and scraping data. We've done research with 120,000 people. What AI does is it looks into the corpus of data and says, here's some research by Dave Ulrich or Ed Lawler or Linda Grattan, and here's a survey of your 20 friends on LinkedIn. And we've all seen those friends on LinkedIn, fill out the little survey. It treats them as equal. I'm going to be really honest, they're not equal. I remember we finished one big survey, and I'm almost done. We finished one big survey with 28,000 people, and my colleague said, I love the data, but let me tell you what I think. And I almost jumped out of my chair and said, I don't care what you think. We have data from 27,999 people. Let's use the data. So, 3 thoughts on AI. If you are an entrepreneur and want to be a thought leader, use AI to look backwards, use your brain to go forward. 2, look at AI up the S curve of informed intelligence that increases my ability to make decisions. And 3rd, sometimes don't trust what you get because it's not using good judgment between different kinds of data.
That's absolutely fascinating. I remember watching Seth Godin talking about the impact of AI, and he was saying it was like the introduction of electricity. All it does is just change the way we do the same stuff,
Yeah.
and we just have to reinvent to be able to see how we work with that.
Whatever Seth Godin says is gold. Well, given what he said about electricity, whatever Seth Godin said is enlightening. Let me build it on
Perfect.
lighting, enlightening. So, I mean, yeah, it's the same idea. We all think it's all new. It's simply about accessing information and accessing knowledge that becomes intelligence to make better decisions. That was my second point. Well said.
Absolutely. Well,
Seth Godin is brilliant.
one of my clients, actually, I was chatting to him the other day, is a friend of mine as well. He's been working in AI for 20 years. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about AI, he's looking at all the children catching up. And he's on a different level to everybody, most people on the planet. So it's fascinating. Do you think that the
So,
way
what would your friend say? What would your friend say we should know about AI?
chatting to him is like talking to Mr. Spock? So when we're talking about the use of AI right now, everyone's talking about how it's going to impact machinery, jobs, how it's going to create AI assistants, and how you can integrate it in the workplace. That's generally where we're playing with. And the technology is like being a toddler. Right now, it's like a 2 year old. So it spits
Correct.
its dummy out, it walks off, it doesn't want to play, it gets distracted, and it's everywhere else. The conversations I have with this gentleman, Angelo Dali, who's an incredible thought leader based in Malta, is about his reprogramming the underlying coding before it comes to us. So it
Okay.
doesn't wander off so much. It stays
Nice.
on point and it learns the conversations and interests that you have. So it's learning you before it answers you, and
I
it
love it.
doesn't then disappear further. Now, when he talks about that, because all I've got is the latest chat GPT, and I know that he helped program it or something similar, then I know that he's miles ahead of the game, but all we can do is work on what we can do. And for
Nice.
me, when I have my clients turn around to me and say, right, Dave, what do we do with AI? I say, lean into your acoustic skills. So in the same way as MTV, for instance, when it used to have rock stars going in the days of MTV, they'd be on videos, they'd be on concert, but then they'd do MTV Unplugged. And then you got to see really what a great artist could do with just the bare minimum. And I think that when you've got AI working with you, which is fantastic, speeds you up, it leans into the expertise of the actual thought leader to say, actually, it's better than this. Don't do it that way because I've done it that way. And I would suggest doing this way because the results will be better based on their knowledge of people and processes.
Absolutely. That's an example of the S curve. He talked about being a toddler. That's 20% up the S curve. The same thing that 500 people said today. There's a lot of ways to get up that S curve. And I love what you just said. One of the things we're seeing right now is there's a lot of knowledge out there. And so companies are putting together knowledge warehouses, knowledge resources, and saying, ask a question and we'll give you knowledge. I don't think that's good enough. I think with AI, we're going to say, what makes Dave, what does Dave need to do to be a better leader? You're Dave or me, Dave. And they can do an assessment and say, I need to be more empathetic. Maybe you need to be more strategic. But we do an assessment. So we're not just saying, what do I need to do a better leader? But AI lets me know what are my strengths and weaknesses, and then pull out of that knowledge resource, that database, the skills that will help me be more effective. I think we call that not best practice because books do best practice. I've got books on my shelf. I've written books here. In fact, I'm about to do another book, and I'm thinking, oh, what company should I use? And I think I'm going to do a book without examples, because I think I'm going to say it's not about a best practice of somebody else. It's about guidance for you to create your best practice. And AI should help me do that. I don't have to go look at what a good company does. And if I start naming them, people will feel bad I missed them. But think of all the companies that everybody talks about today. I don't really care. What I care about is my best practice. And AI can help me diagnose what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and I've got a few of both. I've got more weaknesses than strengths. How can I then access knowledge that will allow me to get better? And I think that's the guidance that will replace best practice.
This just reminds me that when we're on stage together in Dubai, we actually build it as the two Daves, which is like a reunion years later, which is fascinating.
I am so glad they did not ask me to sing. You may sing beautifully, but if they had asked me to sing or dance, we would never have been on stage again.
No, I have
So
the karaoke program around here somewhere, but I'll put it to one side for now. Let's talk about thought leadership. Now, before we do that, I'd like to ask you the question as a thought leader, as seen as the guru and the godfather of HR, and many different titles. Before I first met you, people were just saying, oh, is this, and you've grown even more since, always authored so many books and talked to thousands of people, millions of people about the direction of HR. Now, where did you go? How did you get to be a thought leader in HR? Because often it starts in childhood, exposure to a certain way of thinking, and it builds up inside you. And so when you go into the workplace, you find you've got an advantage. For me, my advantage is I'm very good at working Wi Fi codes of rooms. Now, the reason I'm good at that is because as growing up as a kid of color, of mixed race in predominantly white areas, I learnt fight or flight, but I also learned to understand, to read the people in front of me. So it's like a superhero, the ability to go into any situation, know what's going on in the room, read it like a Wi-Fi code, and then be able to entertain. But you have a superpower that allows you to understand and read people and read the direction of an organization.
I squash a little bit of titles and guru. I mean, I don't know what any of that means. What I find, and I don't know where it comes from, probably parents. I remember and I'll tell a story not about myself because I don't like talking about myself as much. The inventor of polio, Jonas Salk, told the following story. He said, I was a young man. I came home from school. I got a glass of milk and cookies. And I started to eat the cookies and I put the milk closer to the edge of the table. And my mother said, don't do that. Closer. Don't do that. Don't do that. You can all imagine the scene of the little boy putting the milk. Well, guess what? He puts it on the edge and it falls and it breaks and spills milk and breaks the glass. All of us as parents know our instinctive reaction. And he said, my mother looked at me and said, Jonas, what did you learn? What a great message. You made a mistake. What did you learn? I had parents who reinforced that message for me. Dave, let's take you to a French class where you don't speak French very well. What did you learn? Let's take you to sports where you don't play very well, but you try. Let's put you in new situations. Let's go to a new country. And my parents were inquisitive, not brilliant. They both had college degrees. My father said he graduated with the lowest grade point average in the history of his school. So he was not an elite thinker. I think thought leadership is a misnomer. I think it's somebody who observes and sees what's going on. When I go with people, I love to go to a restaurant. In 10 or 15 minutes, I look at the person I'm with and say, so what did you see about this restaurant? How's it working? What's the culture? What's the leadership like? Can you begin to just be an observer where you live, where you work? I'll finally share. I had a professor who was a mentor, and I was studying English. I was going to go to law school, and he said, "We're taking a course in what's called organizational behavior." And he said, "Go into the organizations where you work, where you play, where you worship, where you visit stores, and observe what's going on, what I just said, and write it up. That's your assignment. No readings, no assignments, write up what you learned." So I was an English major. We were studying Shakespeare, King Lear, and I wrote an essay for my English class, The Sources of Power in King Lear. And I turned it into my English professor, who said, that's weird. I turned it into this professor, who said, that's great, do another one. Paradise Lost in Milton. I turned in 14 10-page papers to his class. And he called me in and he said, Dave, you're weird. Nobody writes 14 10-page papers. You must love organizations. And I do. I don't know what thought leader is, but I think I'm a serious observer. Even today, even today, I'm horrible to go to dinner with because look at what I'm going to do. I'll look at you as my dinner companion. What do you see? And then I'll say, could you have the manager come over? You know, between Dave and I, the two Daves, we could improve the productivity of this restaurant 8.5%. Can we give you some counsel? That's not a great introduction. When I go to my church on Sunday, I say to the pastor, you know, here's things you could do to make this work better. I say to the airline, here's things you could do. I've written letters to airline CEOs to improve, and the responses are never incredibly receptive. But I love this stuff. My wife, whose picture is on the mantle,
Yeah.
there's my wife.
Yeah.
She's a very good psychologist. She says I have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is OCD. I have organization compulsive disorder. So if you want to be a thought leader, begin by observing. What do you find passion about looking? I love to look at organizations. How do they work? How do they operate? What works? What doesn't? What could I improve? I've now been in the field 50 years, 40 years, and I'm still discovering almost every day something new about an organization. I'll give an example. I was in a hotel in the United States for the last day and a half, and it was a huge hotel. And I ended up sitting on golf carts to go from room to room. And I'm trying to learn. So I say to the driver of the golf cart, how long have you worked here? I had 5 golf carts in 2 days. All of them had worked there 15 to 25 years. Now remember, these are drivers on golf carts. And it hit me, this hotel does something right. This hotel does something right because they've got a culture that is not transient. They're keeping these folks there. And I realized some of that is I gave them a good tip. So it was partly me, the customer. But I thought, what a cool thing that this hotel can keep golf cart drivers of their guests for 20. One guy was there 29 years
Amazing.
when the hotel opened. And I think the message is I was curious. If our audience for this session, we're sharing an audience. If you're an entrepreneur, you created something because you saw an opportunity that was in the marketplace. Take that curiosity and keep it up. That's thought leadership. What do I see? What do I observe? Today, I observed this hotel must have an incredible culture to keep these drivers the shortest one was 16 years. I, wow. I mean, that's actually pretty cool. And that was real time, happened in the last 24 hours.
It's
So
amazing.
I hope you are an observer and seeing the world and just being curious.
I find it fascinating for lots of reasons. There's something you mentioned earlier about the fact you observe everywhere. I studied a course to be able to become a human lie detector. So you can tell
Oh,
who's
wow.
lying, who's not lying. I'm a hypnotist by trade anyway, and I stopped doing the course. The reason I stopped doing it is because I don't want to tell when my close friends are lying to me. I'd rather they lie to me and I deal with the consequences. I found it was something that's just too intrusive. Does that resonate about the
Yeah, it
ability to
does.
speak
It
into?
does. When I finished my PhD, I decided to go take a course on palm reading to find out what my palm told me. And then I said, I don't need to know what my palm tells me about my future. I have never shared that with a group before, but I have weird lines. And I said, well, why are my lines so weird? And I quit after a couple of books. And I thought, I don't need to look at my future in my hand. The future's in my head. And so I relate to that very nicely. Beautifully said, Dave.
What you said there about the people that remain in a job for a very long time and the culture and the organization, the leadership and the ability to nurture people. Right now, we're going through a real change in the workplace. It's going more remote. There's AI. There's a real need to reinvent. But the challenge is if you're 50 something and your culture that we grew up with, I'm 50 something, was go to get a job, work in an organization, you can retire later on with a gold watch or whatever it would be. That doesn't work anymore, not least the fact you'll live a lot longer. You also may find that because of technology or for various financial reasons, you're being moved to one side for cheaper staff, younger
Yeah.
staff. And so those 30 years initially seem like a waste Because how can you live if you've got all this knowledge but you can't get a job? But I think that that's a perfect chance to reinvent yourself as a rock star in your industry because you have that knowledge. What's your thoughts about that 50 something reinvention, whether it's a side hustle or become a consultant? Does that make sense?
I love the principle behind what you're saying. And let me push back just a little bit. I think some principles are timeless. Everybody says the next generation is so different. They love creativity. I'm going to bet, Dave, you love creativity. I'm hitting late 60s, 70s. I love creativity. It's a timeless principle.
It is.
Now, there are things that are timely based on the world we live in. One of the timeless principles for me is success is not what we do, it's how what we do helps others do what they do better. So if I'm 50, I've been in a job for 20 or 30 years, stop and do a self reflection. Not what I know, but how does what I know and what I'm able to do help somebody else get better at what they could do? And if I'm going to go a side hustle, you used the word, start a business, start something, don't start with what I know. Start with how what I know will help somebody else get better at what they do. Leadership is not about what you know and do, it's how what you know and do makes others more successful. And when I can begin to think about, so what do I know? I know how to observe well. I could teach that, and it happens to be in human resources. It could be in marketing or strategy or finance. You know how to read a group. If you know how to do that, how can I teach others that set of skills? And I call that outside in. The value is not what we know, it's how what we know helps others do what they need to do better. If you're an entrepreneur, your brand as an entrepreneur is not just what you created, it's how what you created helps others succeed. Do the same for your own self. Brand yourself. What is it others can see in me that will allow me to help them reach their goals?
And how do they get over that massive fear? If you've worked as an employee, whether you're a manager, supervisor, or CEO, you now have to go out without a guaranteed wage coming in and go up against the big bad world. That's a massive shift and a
It
mindset
is.
shift. What's your advice for
What
that?
would you say? You're the expert on some of this. What would you say? How do you help people replace fear with hope? What would you say?
Well, there's a couple of things I'd look at. First of all, imposter syndrome. And what I get them to do is work out what they do when they're in the zone at work or at sport or whatever, and give that a name and a personality and hand the driving, the steering wheel over to that version of them. For me, when I've got a microphone, I become Max. I made up the name, but I had to learn something after the COVID where I was suddenly back into the workplace again. I wasn't ready for it. So Max started making my business decisions. And I found that that ability to make very snap decisions in a live event skilled me to the point where I can look at lots of things and go bang, bang, bang. Me, the social media version of me, Dave Crane, isn't as good. He's got a family, he's got past, but Max is a zone. So I handed Max the job of taking things to the next level. And I think that imposter syndrome it affects maybe 80, 90% of people in some way, shape, or form. The ability to tap into a new version of yourself and hand over the reins to that is huge. Then I
I
also,
love it. Yeah,
sorry,
keep
go on.
going. That's so good. No, keep going. That's great.
Thank you. I also believe that everybody has the ability to step into what they need to do. It's just that they're not sure how. And I realized when I did my own self reflection that my phrase that always works for me is jump and grow wings on the way down. So I'd make calculated risks all the time. And when I'm not sure, I go for it. If there's a little gap, not a ridiculous gap, but a little gap, I go for it. We'll actually shove Max in to do that gap. And it's really working out. So I think a lot of it is data driven by looking around at your systems, your strategies, and your impact. But a large amount of it is trusting in yourself and realizing that we get one go at this. What do you want to do? Sit and wait and lick your wounds? Or just go, well, in a perfect life, I could have this. And one thing I was looking at, which Vishen Lakiani, who is a great thought leader as well, was talking about the other day, is the ability to look at what I think he calls um, quantum mentorship. And this is the idea that you have got ultimate versions of you, unlimited versions of you that did a different job. So there's a version of me that's a bus driver or a golfer or a CEO of an airline or something like that. If you can tap into that version and say to him, what should I do next? Then you can fast track, because ultimately your brain's a supercomputer and it will give you a version of what you need to have. So a lot of it's mindfulness, a lot of it's self hypnosis, but I think the possibilities are endless. Now these are very woo woo type ideas, but from working with people, they're actually very practical, and I think the workplace understands it a little bit better. Certainly in the HR department, where they have to deal with talking to people about what they should do next. The final thing I'd say in this is the brain trust. Why do people get sacked? Why do people leave you've had them for 30 years? Get them on a retainer, have them as some kind of brain trust you can tap into. Whatever they do, wherever they go next, they're going to throw people back at you to say, this is somebody I recommend who can work with you in the future. But also, you've got a huge group of people who can help you. You don't have to start from scratch when it comes to leadership, because you've got all these managers. Sorry, you did ask me.
Now people know why you're such a great podcaster and why your books are so good, because you have very good specific ideas. So I would say amen, amen, amen. I'll tell you two things that have helped me, one long term and one short term. One, I'm anxious. I get anxious. I work. I'm consumed. I'm a type A. When I was younger, I went to a career psychologist, and he had me read a book by Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Old book. A lot of ideas. Here was the idea that grabbed me. What's the worst thing that can happen if you take this decision? I turn a paper into English into my OB professor. What's the worst thing that can happen? They get mad. Can you live with that? Yeah. Then go ahead. Face the worst and move forward. I just have found that so helpful. So I get asked to you get asked to do. I'm sure you've given talks in places where you don't feel qualified. I have. What's the worst thing that can happen? They're going to discover I'm pretty stupid. Well, I already know that. Could I live with somebody telling me I'm stupid? Yeah, I can live with that. Good. Move on. You can face it. I have found that helpful for me. Can I face my fear and replace it with hope? The other thing that is for me so fun, failure is an opportunity to learn. That's a Carol Dweck quote from Growth Mindset. I love the idea of saying, if I'm not failing a little bit, not major crisis failure, but if I'm not making some mistakes, I'm not learning. And I think the ability to learn is to say, what worked? What didn't? What am I going to learn from that experience? And the mindset, and it's one I'd encourage our audience today to listen as you're listening to this. What's the best year of your life? And I love that. I ended a session on that today. The year I got married, the year I had children, the year I graduated, the year, one person said, the year I got divorced, whatever the best year of your life is. And I said, you've missed it. The best year of your life is the next 12 months. And may it ever be so, because that's the best is yet ahead. Don't be consumed with the failure in the past. Be absorbed by what's the next 12 months, and it will work. And so for me, it's what's the worst thing that can happen? How do I learn? How do I accept the vulnerability of failure and run into it? That for me is so helpful as I coach people, and the same with you, the things you said. I have some leg problems. I'm getting older. I have some neuropathy. My parents were wonderful and gave me many great attributes. They also gave me a few things that I'm not thrilled with. For a while, I tried to hide it. Now I go, I need a little help getting on stage. My mind's pretty good, but get over it. People have responded so well. You're being honest, you're being vulnerable, and you're moving past it. It's not going to get in your way. I encourage our audience to say, what's the next agenda you want to play in? Replace fear with hope. Replace fear with hope.
That's a beautiful sentiment. And one final thought on this is, as people have to reinvent, they take on AI, they change jobs, or maybe go in to start up their company, or maybe decide not to retire, because why would you want to when you do stuff that you love? There is that trepidation. There is
Yeah.
that little voice inside your head, that imposter syndrome that says maybe you're not good enough to be able to do it. You've already said about the fear, but there's also the fear that the world is watching you through social media and comments and the dopamine hits you want to get with likes and shares and loves with all the things that you do. What is the best way to be able to move forward running an organization or an organization called you to be able to find success in the future?
I'm going to go right back. I give talks. I've done it for decades. I write books. And remember, my father had the lowest grade point average in the history of his school. Um, Run into the fear. Face it. What's the worst thing that can happen? Face it. And if it doesn't work, if I don't do what I hoped I'd have done, don't hide from it. You know what? I got home from this talk a few hours ago. My wife said, "How'd it go?" Well, I did some well. I missed a few things that I wish I'd have covered. And she said, "Has that happened before?" She's a very good psychologist. Yeah. She said, "So what are you learning?" And I've done it for 40 years. Now I'm going to make another confession. I get nervous and it doesn't go away. By nature, I'm a pretty strong introvert. To get up in front of 500 people for an hour and a half or 2 hours and expose my vulnerabilities, that's not who I am. I don't do dinner. They had a big gala event to orient people. Dave, you're going to come to the gala. Oh, no. Oh, no. I'm not going to make a gala. But I know that in that setting, I can play the world that I need to play. And I hope people will be willing to find a way to do it. I love your idea of Max. There's an American late night TV host. He's old. His name was Jay Leno. Jay Leno is also an introvert. He had a trigger. You have Max. When he did a Tonight Show, he'd always start with, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tonight Show." And that was his Max. It suddenly triggered in him that he's going to put on another persona and become the entertainer. I've done that in my talks. I stand up and I say, "I'm just honored and delighted to be here." That triggers in me the Max that I can now play that role. And by the way, when I'm done, I'm going to go back and hide in my room because that's my style. I'm going to go write my books. I tell my wife, I live with my idea friends. And she, "Well, I'm a friend." And I said, "You're a good idea sometimes." But that's my world. But we can get out of our world. So to our audience of entrepreneurs, build the brand you want to become. Take a leap of faith. Find hope.
And trust in yourself because you are the best
Oh,
that you know. And that
yeah.
that is as good as it gets.
And when you fail, be delighted. Now, if you keep failing for the same thing, then there's going to be another problem. But if you're not failing, you're not learning. I mean, that's the growth mindset from Carol Dweck is, yeah, I'm getting better at I don't organize. Somebody said you teach like Good Morning Vietnam, an old movie where Robin Williams just went all over the map in his teaching. I've gotten better at being more disciplined. I'm learning. And I hope everybody who listens to this learns and becomes their own brand, their own thought leader. And we're all different. We're all different. You have some gifts, superpowers. I have a few gifts. Everybody's got a gift from heaven or whatever source that comes from. Recognize that talent. I love the scripture in the Bible where the 5 talents, the 2 talents, and the 1 talent are all equal. We've all got a talent, and I hope we don't hide them.
That's perfect. That's an amazing place to stop. Dave Ulrich, it's been an honor to bring the two Daves back together and also to get your thoughts on a world that's daunting, but I think ultimately more rewarding than it's ever been before. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I had somebody ask me, they said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "I'll give you advice. Fulfill your potential." May those who listen, that's all you can do for me. If you fulfill your potential, you have done what I hope you can do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You make me feel better. You have
Thank you.
such a great outlook. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dave. So there we had the incredible Dave Ulrich in the flesh on the other side of the world, sharing what you need to know with your thought leadership and your positioning. Whether you become an industry icon or you become more effective in what you do, it's that balance of happiness you really need to get. We've got more incredible thought leaders like Dave Ulrich coming up in future episodes of the show. But meanwhile, as we said, jump and grow wings on the way down. And also ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? And once you've prepared for that, it's guaranteed to be better. I look forward to catching up with you in future episodes. Please subscribe. I'll catch you next time on Speak on Stage. Thank you for tuning into another insightful episode of Speak on Stage with Dave Crane. We hope you found today's conversation inspiring and packed with valuable insights to help you to amplify your presence on stage too. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more aspiring speakers just like yourself. Remember, the stage is your platform to shine, and with the right tools and mindset, you can captivate any audience anywhere. So keep honing your craft, refining your message, and never shy away from the spotlight. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive even deeper into the world of public speaking and performance. Until then, keep speaking, keep shining, and keep making an impact. This is Dave Crane signing off. See you next time on Speak on Stage.